Garland Nixon will stop Ritter.
We've not been preparing for this.
Let me ask you this, Scott. Let's use some context. The U.S., the Biden administration is in a world of hurt. This NEOCON Ukraine project, all in on it. Oh, it's Ukraine. It's about authoritarianism. It's about, all this such crap. They, all of the rhetoric they used. Now this kicks off, which has the potential, who would have believed it, to make the Ukraine conflict look like nothing. You're talking about 1 billion people here that are furious, 1 billion people and it's one thing if you're talking about a state actor. A lot of these militias, and that's they're armed, maybe trained, maybe supported by state actors, and clandestinely, but you got non-state actors everywhere. It's a disaster, and you're exposed all over the place. I realize all of these bases, we got bases all over the place to control them, and if something breaks out, we can attack here, and we can bring helicopters from here. But they're all sitting ducks. So you've got this disastrous potential on your hand that you could get wiped out of the Middle East in and out in 24 hours. You could only hope to evacuate the soldiers. Okay. Meanwhile, Ukraine's going down. And Alexei Arestovich, former advisor to Zelensky, is now saying, yeah, we need a new government. Zelensky, he ain't getting it done. You have what seems to be more and more mass in the field, huge numbers of, or at least numbers of Ukrainian soldiers. They're getting surrounded. They're getting put in cauldrons. They're putting up the white flag. This thing is falling apart. So much so that Putin's like, I'm good. Let me go over here and talk about this Belt and Road Initiative. Let me talk about some economic things. He's looking at that saying, we got that under control. We don't, for the most part, I'm going to work on some other diplomatic things. Put it in context of these two debacles that the neocons have simultaneously dragged us into. Your thoughts on that, Scott Ritter?
First of all, let's talk about Putin's trip to China. One interesting thing happened is China. China. They back in February 4th, I believe, before the invasion during the Beijing Olympics, Putin flew to China and he met with Xi Jinping, and they had an interesting conversation, and they released a joint 5,000 word joint statement that basically said, this relationship is better than any alliance. We're friends, open-ended. We're going to work together, etc. Then Putin ordered the Russian military into Ukraine, and China was a little bit like, okay, we're friends, but this insults our Westphalian principles of sovereignty, and and they didn't go against Russia, but they weren't all in. They were sort of like, like this. Xi Jinping just went all in. I don't know if people caught that. Xi Jinping just came out and went 100% behind Russia, militarily, security-wise. We are with you. Anything you do in Ukraine, we're with you, buddy. 100%. Your problems are our problems. We now have the equivalent of a military alliance. That's sort of game, set, match right there. It doesn't mean that Chinese troops are going to come over the border. It doesn't mean that Chinese equipment's going to come in, but it means that China has just backed Russia, and I think it's a reciprocal relationship. So Russia's just backed China. So if we want to hook and jab with China in the Pacific, we got the Russians to worry about now. So that happened. We haven't been talking about Ukraine lately. I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with a gentleman named Vladimir Trukhan. He's a colonel, in the reserves. He works with the Central Military District. He's an advisor. So he sort of knows what he's talking about. 3 interesting takeaways from this conversation. Takeaway 1, you talked about the cauldron and the Russians, closing the cauldron in Advika and elsewhere. What he says is, why would we ever close a cauldron? So we're never going to close a cauldron. That's old school. You see, when you close a cauldron, imagine you're the leading element in the arm that's trying to link up. When you make that link up, what just happened to you? You just got surrounded. You think you surrounded the guys on the inside, but there's guys on the outside coming at you too. So now you've got a huge problem. But if you maneuver so that you threaten the cauldron, you get in a position where you control the line of communication into the cauldron with fire. Now the guys on the inside have a choice. They can sit there. Resupply is going to be tough. They're going to get hungry. They're going to get shelled. They could try to retreat. They're going to get nailed. But the bottom line is you're dictating the outcome, and it becomes a meat grinder. That's why they never surrounded Bakhmut. They always left the escape route in Bakhmut to let people go out. Mariupol was an exception. But Mariupol, remember, even after they surrounded it and they pushed off towards Zaporizhia, in Mariupol, there were a significant number of Russian forces committed to that battle that couldn't be used elsewhere. Russia's not going to play that game anymore. So you see that. You see up in Kupiansk, the other cauldron that's developing. You see a similar cauldron developing down in Robotyno, where Russia has positioned itself controlling it in. What they've done is they've created 3 massive cauldrons that Ukraine now, in order to sustain their position, have to reinforce, have to suck in their reserves. They're getting slaughtered. In order to sustain the position, you have to keep feeding raw meat into the meat grinder. That's the Russian operation. So I didn't, I'm like, I asked the question, when are you going to just close it, surround them, and wipe them out? I said, never. Why would we do that? This is the way to do it. And in the West, we have everybody the Russians are so weak. They can't close the cauldron. Look, they went to Advika, but they failed to surround it. Hey guys, they're not trying to surround it. They got the position they want. They took the slag heap. They control the line of communication. So I think people need to understand that Russia is controlling this battle. 2, Kupiansk, what's happening there? He said something very interesting. He said, you do know that, when we talk about what's going on in Zaporizhia and Lugansk and Donetsk, that we're talking about Russia, that we're fighting on Russian soil. Kupiansk is Ukrainian soil. He said, we wanted to keep that area quiet. We don't want to go to war on Ukrainian soil. We have to maintain that position because the Ukrainians won't make peace. So to protect the flank of Lugansk, we had to occupy this territory, but we were willing to keep it quiet. The Ukrainians decided they wanted to play the game. And so just like we earlier said, fool around, find out. Well, they just found out. And the Russians now have opened up a cauldron in Kupiansk that's slaughtering the Ukrainians. But what he said is, you have to understand the political decision behind that. We have now that we are actively engaged on Ukrainian soil. It means that Ukraine has lost Kharkov, that this won't end until we take Kharkov. And once we've started taking Kharkov, we will continue to take additional Ukrainian territories as needed. So, we've always been talking about, when Russia is going to make the decision, what's the next decision? They've made that decision. People need to understand that this war has transitioned it away from Russia simply trying to fight for the 4 territories that it acquired through the referendum last year. Russia's now in the we are taking more territories phase of this operation. You and I talked about it. It's happening right now. Most Western observers are so excited about the ATACMS. Oh my God, ATACMS came in. A quick news flash on ATACMS. It didn't work. They fired, I think, 7 missiles. 5 were shot down. 2 hit the target. They damaged 2 helicopters, or destroyed 2 helicopters, damaged 7 others. The Russian air defense, this was something new to it. They've now captured the data. They're fine-tuning it. Ukraine had 1 chance for a knockout blow. It's done. They didn't get it. It's over. 1 or 2 ATACMS may be launched, land here and there, but the Russians now have the air defense solution. There's no advantage. The Ukrainians have nothing left. So that battle's over. So we can have all the discussions we want in Congress about, Joe Biden. We can do 2. I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I can supply Ukraine and supply the Israelis at the same time. It doesn't matter, Joe, because the Ukrainians can't win. And the Israelis can't win. It doesn't matter if you supply them or not. And the third thing that came out of this conversation is that, first of all, we'll start off. He said that the Russian army today is orders of magnitude better than the Russian army that started this conflict. He said that it's a very efficient military machine. They've mastered the art of combat logistics sustainability, something we in America haven't done. for some time now. They've got it down. They've mastered the operational art. Our training doesn't take into account the drone swarms that exist right now. He said, we've incorporated these new weapon systems. We've built new tactics. We have a new way of operating. If you brought in a brigade that's trained to fight a Cold War closing battle with a Soviet, equivalent, and you bring them in this, they're going to be slaughtered because their training is all wrong. Their tactics are all wrong. Everything they're doing is wrong. They don't operate in the electronic warfare environment that exists today. They don't operate in the drone environment. They don't operate in the counter battery environment. They'll be slaughtered. And he said, just so people understand, the Russian military today, the number one focus of the Russian military isn't the special military operation. The number one focus of the Russian military is building the Russian military from 900,000 to 1.5 million. And while they're doing this, and this is the big takeaway here, ladies and gentlemen, they have perfected their mobilization. He said, look, it was an embarrassment what happened when we mobilized last time. We took structures that hadn't been tested since, ever. Assumptions had been made about this. People were being corrupt, stealing this, and it was just a cluster, what. He said, we worked our way through it. We mobilized 300,000. We got them trained. But he said, there's a lot of mistakes. He said, those mistakes don't exist anymore. We have perfected the system. We're in the process. We are seamlessly receiving at a time when the U.S. Army can't match the recruit. They set a recruiting goal. They can't meet it. They have to take down units because we don't have manpower to keep the units up. And I know Congress is talking about we're going to build an army capable of fighting on two fronts. Well, that's going to require just about doubling the conventional force. So we're going to try and bring in another 400,000 men, but we can't recruit the 60,000 we need to maintain the current level. It's the Russians, on the other hand, nonstop recruiting. Guys are volunteering, hundreds of thousands coming in addition to the conscription. The majority of the conscripts coming in are signing contracts to stay on full time. They're getting training that is configured to defeat a NATO enemy, combat proven training with all the gadgets and the equipment necessary. The Russian military today is the finest fighting force on the face of the earth, bar none. And I hope America never has to find out that is indeed the fact. But everything this guy said is backed up with reality. I mean, they're combat hardened troops. Even the Ukrainians, you don't hear the Ukrainians talking about the Russians breaking and running anymore. Even the Ukrainians are going, yeah, these guys are pretty good. They're very well trained. They know what they're doing. They don't run. They fight. They're killing us. Yeah, that's called a better force than you. So, this is the takeaway. Russia, Ukraine, we may not be talking about today, but understand it's there, it's moving forward, and it's not moving forward in a way that's good for either Ukraine or NATO. Russia's in the territorial acquisition mode. They're not in we're just going to defend the 4 territories mode. Ukraine missed its opportunity. That opportunity will never come back. They've changed the equation. Now we move to the Middle East, and we've talked about this. So we can't win there. We don't have the force structure to do there. How is this going to end? Israel is in the process of being strategically defeated for the first time in its existence. And a strategic defeat isn't so much what's happening on the battlefield. It's what's happening here in America and around the world. There was a prohibition. You weren't allowed to be critical of Israel. You were called anti-Semitic. Just straight up. That was the standard, knee-jerk reaction. Well, I don't know about the Zionism. You're criticizing Zionism. You're an anti-Semite. No, I'm just criticizing Zionism. Now people are starting to criticize Zionism because in Israel they're starting to criticize Zionism. The experiment has failed. There's a growing recognition that Benjamin Netanyahu is perhaps the worst leader Israel's ever had, and he's probably going to be the man who helped destroy the modern Israeli state. In America, there's going to start to be talk about why we can't, why can we have a debate about Ukraine? Because remember, Ukraine's supposed to be about our existential survival. Man, if the Russians beat Ukraine and they beat NATO, that's an existential problem for us. We've got to stick this out. We've got to fund it until, because it's our life, maybe it's our existence. And suddenly it's not that important anymore. Why? Israel. What is it about Israel that represents an existential question to the United States? Nothing. Israel could disappear today. I'm not advocating for that, but it could disappear today and would have no impact on America. None whatsoever. This is purely an emotional bond with them. Again, but people keep saying it's about the Holocaust. No, it isn't. Do you understand that the emotional bond between American Jews and Israel didn't really develop until 1967? That prior to that, most American Jews were sort of hesitant about this Zionist experiment because they knew what was going on. They knew they were stealing it from the Palestinians. It made them sick. It made them uncomfortable. They didn't like this. But in 1967, the mythology of this brave Jewish state standing forward, standing strong against the world, and American Jews started to migrate. The money started to flow in. And with that money comes now, with that interest comes the need to politicize this. AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. You do know that they're a foreign agent. They work for the Israeli government. I know this because I've dealt with AIPAC. I've been sitting. I know how they think because they told me. I was in with them. They are 100% a controlled asset of the Israeli government. They commit espionage on behalf of the Israeli government. They lobby on behalf of the Israeli government. When I was trying to stop the war in Iraq, every time I went to a congressional office to have a talk with them about the truth about weapons of mass destruction, behind me came an AIPAC team that was bird dogging me. Knock on the door. Hello, we're AIPAC. Let me just remind you that we own you. We contributed to your election campaign. And if you don't do what we tell you to do, we will primary you. See, that's the biggest threat to anybody. It's not, if you're a Republican, your biggest threat isn't having a Democrat come against you. Your biggest threat is being primaried. And AIPAC is an expert at primarying people. And so AIPAC owns Congress. And it's not me coming up with this. Netanyahu brags about it. The Israelis brag about it. AIPAC brags about it. But you're not allowed to talk about it because that's anti-Semitic. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it. It's time we be honest about what's going on with Israel. Because if we don't be honest about this, we won't get a solution that will be to the benefit of Israel. I want Israel to survive. I don't want Israel to go away. I want there to be a place where Jews feel safe because the Holocaust really did happen. But they can't feel safe by disenfranchising millions of Palestinians. The Palestinians need to feel the same safety, need to have the same security. You can't have a situation where Israel gets the biggest army in the world and Palestine gets nothing. How about a situation where they peacefully coexist, where neither one needs this army? There's no reason for Israel to have nuclear weapons, none whatsoever. And if the United States isn't in the business of telling Israel that you have to get rid of your nuclear weapons in order for there to be peace, then we're doing the wrong thing. JFK had the right idea. He was killed for it, but he had the right idea.
Well, let me add this. If you remember during the, I mentioned this, I did that. I've got it up on my channel. I did my UN speech here a week or so ago. But one of the things that I mentioned was that in December of 2021, the Russians put forward a list of security demands. There's a term they used, indivisible security, right? I cannot have security at the expense of someone else. That's not security. We're going to make deals of security where everybody on both sides says, you good with it? Yeah. You good with it? Yeah. We got security. That's exactly what you're saying. Israel cannot be secure if they say, we're going to be secure. How are you going to do that? We're going to bomb the Palestinians. We're going to make sure they can't get enough food. We're going to send people over there. We're going to build walls. We're going to tear down their olive trees. All these things that they do on a day-to-day basis that make their lives a living hell and infuriate the Muslim world. That ain't security. To me, it's a temporary condition that you've created using force and coercion. And the force and coercion ensures that it's going to be temporary because at some point, the people again, Putin said indivisible. At the point where the Russians said, we don't feel secure. If we ain't secure, nobody's going to be secure. We're knocking out Ukraine, right? And that's the issue of a new, when the Russians and the Chinese, when a lot of countries start talking about a new world order, I think one of the things they're talking about is, look, The Chinese have issues on the border with the Indians. A lot of people have issues on the border. That's not unusual. You got Kashmir in Pakistan. You've got Azerbaijan, the Nagorno-Karabakh, all these kind of things. But I think one of the things they're talking about in the New World Order is indivisible security, where you, forget this rules-based international order. You use the UN Charter and agreed international legal precedents, and you make deals where everybody walks away and says, win-win, we all feel secure. That's the only way you can have a lasting security. Your thoughts, Scott?
Look, I agree. Look, the Russians, if you take a look at what the Russians proposed in December of 2021, I think December 17th was the actual day they turned over 2 treaties, draft treaties, one with NATO, one with the United States. They weren't saying that NATO has to go away. That didn't say that at all. They weren't saying that, we disagree with the premise. What they said is NATO can't be on its borders, that NATO needs to military. They weren't even asking for the political pullback of NATO, meaning if you were a member of NATO, okay, you're a member of NATO. But NATO's military infrastructure needs to pull back to the 1997 lines because that's in Russia's interests. Now, what would Russia do? And if that happened, Russia would implement the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty, which means that Russia would reduce its forces in the Western zone and move them back beyond the Ural Mountains, so that now everybody's living in sort of peace. Nobody has an advantage. It's called security. It's indivisible security. It means that I'm secure now, you're secure, we're all secure together. NATO wouldn't go for it because NATO's idea of security, it wasn't about NATO security. People need to understand that. NATO expansion was to bring in Ukraine to destroy Russia. That's why Russia could never go along with it. When Russia wins this war, and they will win this war, Russia will put something similar to the treaty that they submitted in December of 2021 back on the table. They're not going to demand the disintegration of NATO. They're just going to say all this stuff you've been putting up by our borders got to go away because we can't be secure otherwise. And you ask us what we'll do. We just proved it. Went from 900,000 to 1.5 million. Much of those new forces are allocated to kill you. And we have the best army in the world that's designed to kill you. So if you want to give us the opportunity to kill you, we'll do it. We don't want to do it. What we'd like to do is live in peace. End of story. That's Russia's role. It could happen in the Middle East. It's going to be a tough thing to swallow because the Israelis, they what they say is if you said it, if we don't feel secure, nobody's secure. But the Israelis are so paranoid, probably because history has taught them to be paranoid. What do you expect if I went into a neighborhood and I mugged people, threw them out of their house and said, this now belongs to me? All their former neighbors are going to go, we're not happy about that. And now I have bad relations with the neighbors. So what I do is ensure that I kill a lot of them. I disarm them. I arm myself up and I say, now I threaten, intimidate all you. I now feel secure. But they don't. Remember what Russia said, indivisible security. So the Arabs don't feel secure. So they build up their military capabilities. Look at Iran. Israel has nuclear weapons. I keep telling people, what happens when Israel nukes Tehran? Israel disappears instantly. You want to know how they disappear? Because Iran has 10,000 precision-guided ballistic missiles aimed at Israel. When I say precision-guided, they have shown a photograph of the prime minister's residence, and they've shown the window where the 2,000-pound warhead is going to penetrate. And it will penetrate that window. And they've shown all the targets. They've identified everything. They will blanket Israel. It's a small country, ladies and gentlemen. I've been there many times. Small country.
Well, how about this, Scott? The Palestinians defeated the Iron Dome, as you can with any anti-aircraft system. You overwhelm it. You give it too many targets. A significant amount of the targets don't even have to have warheads. We saw the Russians in Ukraine fire these old missiles from the 1950s that didn't even have a warhead. They'd fire a cluster of them. The Ukrainians fire. They'd mix them in with real ones. Now you've got all of these objects coming in. You don't know what's a warhead, what's not a warhead. It's easy to overwhelm an aircraft system with, an anti-air defense system if you've got literally tens of thousands. And might I add, Hezbollah has literally tens of thousands. There's
right, but
you can't defend against that. You have to either use diplomacy or things are going to go bad for you.
There's another aspect to this too. I mean, I agree with everything you said, but it gets even worse. You see, Iron Dome was configured to defeat the primitive rockets being fired out of Hamas and the Katyusha rockets coming out of Lebanon. It's not configured to defeat modern, sophisticated ballistic missiles, especially those that maneuver, especially as those come in higher engagement rates. You've got these Hamas rockets that fire, and they're not high speed, and the radar picks them up. And yes, you got a whole bunch of them, 150, but it can pick out and it can send 150 interceptors up. Each one picks its own target, maneuvers in and hits it. That's why you see the nice little dance that's taking place, because they're communicating with one another. Guys, Hezbollah's figured it out, so has Iran. Do you understand that they're going to fire warheads that are going to be jamming Israeli Iron Dome communications? I hope people understand that. So as the missile that Israel fires up goes, okay, I'm ready to talk. Now you ain't talking, because they fired, in addition to the missiles that they fired to go boom, they fired some to come in and go beep, 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 and it's jammed. It don't work. That's just modern warfare. But they're not just going to saturate it. The Iron Dome can't shoot them down. Now, Israel has something called somebody's sling. I forget, David's sling or something. It's not that good either. The Iranian missiles are coming in at too high of an engagement rate. They're coming in. They're not purely ballistic trajectory. There will be maneuvering warheads. You can't shoot it down. They're going to play. But here's the worst part about Iron Dome. Israel sent, because they're shooting a whole bunch of them. Hamas ain't stupid. Hamas is pretty smart. And they've been firing all these rockets. And Israel's been firing all their Iron Dome. And Hamas, they said, we have an estimate of how many Iron Dome missiles Israel has. So we're just going to keep firing. We started this war knowing who we were fighting. We have all these missiles. We just keep firing them. And now Israel called up the United States, said, hey, we need an emergency resupply. And there's a SANM missiles or whatever they are, the interceptor missiles, bring them all. And Israel's sort of expecting the United States to say, yep, load up C-17s, send them in. How many you need? 5, 10,000? They got a little more than 300, and that's all we have. They're out of missiles, Garland. They're out of missiles, and Hezbollah hasn't even engaged yet. That's the thing that scares the crap out of the Israelis, because when Hezbollah starts firing, there ain't nothing to stop them. They will destroy everything they aim at, and these aren't primitive Hamas rockets. These are Iranian munitions. Why do you think Israel's been bombing Syria so often? They're trying to interdict the supply lines coming in, interdict the supply of these missiles coming in, these modern precision-guided missiles. It didn't work. Hezbollah has them in spades, more than what Hamas has, and Israel's out of interceptor missiles. They don't have anything left, and we don't have anything to give them. That's the situation that exists. This is why the Israelis are in an absolute panic, which is why I believe that Joe Biden's getting ready to basically try and tell the Israelis, you got to negotiate. And there's going to have to be some sort of face-saving mechanism. But I think what you're going to see is he's going to make a case to the Israelis. They're going to hold off on going into Gaza while Blinken tries to reach out to an Arab world that doesn't want to talk to us anymore. We've lost all credibility. I just saw somebody's comment, that Biden apparently has backed up the Israeli story about the hospital that was struck. I don't know what the truth of that is. I haven't seen the fragments and all that, but I will tell you that it doesn't matter, because the whole world, that the entire Muslim world has risen up as if Israel did strike it, and nobody trusts Israel anymore. They lie.
Look, Serene Abu Akla. Remember what happened? For several months, the Israelis said, "Oh no, we didn't shoot her. It was Hezbollah fighters, Hamas fighters that were firing and accidentally hit her." This went on for months and months and months. And after a while, they finally said, "Well, we did an investigation, and it looks like it was our guys." So who's going to believe them?
Right, but nobody, before her,
you know what I'm saying? Nobody's going to believe them. Go ahead.
Before her, there was if you go back to 1996, I believe, when Israel was actively involved in Lebanon. I think it's Kurna. I could be wrong on the name, but it's a town, a village in Lebanon where the United Nations, they had the Fijian troops from Fiji were there, and Israel was carrying out. Hezbollah was firing rockets. Israel was countering, and so the local civilians went and got in a bomb shelter in this UN facility, and Hezbollah apparently had set up a mortar tube nearby and was firing things, and next thing you know, boom, boom, boom. Israeli artillery comes in and blows up it kills a whole bunch of them, slaughters them. The Israelis were, first of all, the Israelis went, we didn't do that. That was Hezbollah rockets, standard tactic. We didn't do that. Hezbollah did it. No, it was Israeli. Well, we did it because Hezbollah put our artillery tube, and it was this. No. Finally, the truth has come out. You know who Naftali Bennett is? The former prime minister of Israel. You know, he used to be a badass. He used to be a member of Sariyat Matkal, their elite force. Bennett was leading a Sariyat Matkal unit in the vicinity of Kurna to do a reconnaissance, deep reconnaissance of where the Hezbollah stuff is. His unit got compromised, and he called in artillery fire to break contact. Basically, he panicked. And as a result of trying to disengage, the artillery fire ended up slaughtering a bunch of innocent Lebanese civilians and UN peacekeepers. But the Israelis lied about it. They said there wasn't a drone over the battlefield. Everybody saw the drone over the battlefield. They went, well, it wasn't looking. No. The drone doesn't go over there and not look. That's what it does. The drone was there supporting Naftali Bennett's people by looking at everything. He was calling in the strikes that were confirmed by the drone. It was a deliberate act of murder by the Israelis, and they lied about it. They're lying about the hospital right now through their teeth. I can tell you, it's funny. I wish I had made one of my little short videos about this, but when I heard the Israelis, they were saying last night, we have communications intercepts of the Hamas people talking about this, and they're going to, they're walking out, and I was like, honey, they're making it up right now. They're finding the Arab linguists, and they're going to sit there and do what the Ukrainians did. Because you remember early on, the Ukrainians were like, we got a Russian calling home to his mommy saying, oh, this, and I'm like, no, you don't. Listen to the voices. They're Ukrainian voices. They ain't Russian voices. The Germans, we intercepted this. No, you didn't. You made it up. The Israelis made this up. And it's one of the most ridiculous conversations you've ever heard in your life. Did you see the rocket take off and it landed on the hospital? What hospital are you talking about? That hospital. There's a hospital there? Yeah, if you take a left on this street and you walk by it, it's near that cemetery where they fire all the rockets from. You know how those people put the rockets in the cemetery? Oh, yeah, they do that, don't they? And you're just going, right? Did some lawyer sit down and say, in order to win this case, we have to make the following points? So now we have people reading. It's the dumbest script ever. If you ever listen to real combat communications, first of all, it's not, it's like anything, a little bit of excitement for it. Hey, there was they fired rockets from there. Calm down. Don't talk on this net. No. I mean, that's what it is. You can't hear half of what they say because they're screaming into a mic and all this stuff. This is literally two guys sitting in. It's like that scene from True Lies where Arnold Schwarzenegger's trying to cook up the script for, and the guy's reading the French thing. Crap. 100% crap. The Israelis, look, I used to travel there. I used to call them my friends. Not anymore. They're not my enemies, but they're not my friends. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they spy on America. Please, every American out there, understand Israel has a dedicated espionage program designed to spy on us. We accuse the Russians of manipulating American elections. The Israelis buy American politicians every single year, and we say nothing about it. They lie, they cheat, they steal. They aren't America. They don't have American values. Our values are not to go in and suppress millions of people. We do it, but it's not our values. We're supposed to believe in equality for all. Israel's not the 51st state. They're not the extension of America. They're not even the friends of America. They mock us. Please listen to me when I tell you this. They make fun of us behind our back. They view us as the dupes we are. They believe that they can get us to do anything they want us to do. That day's over. Israel's been exposed for what they are. And I think America's starting to realize that in this multilateral universe that we're starting to have to live in, we need to start paying attention to the brown people. Those Arabs, those Indonesians, those Asians, they count and they're unhappy. And the white people that live on the ground in Israel, They don't get to call the shots anymore. There's only 6 million of them, 7 million of them. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying that, you know, when you have 1 billion Muslims or more, and you got 6 million Jews saying we dictate the outcome to the billion, that math doesn't add up. That dog don't hunt.
Yeah, I think was it Stalin and Lenin that said something about quantity and quality, and quantity having a quality of, you know, having a quality of its own numbers. Well, I'll say this. I'll end by saying this. If I were in Taiwan right now, I'd be calling China saying, guys, I think maybe perhaps in hindsight, we've been a little too aggressive. If I'm looking at Ukraine and I'm looking at Israel and I'm in Taiwan, I'm like, yeah, we better just make some kind of a deal and work this thing out, because the NEOCON projects don't work out well for those who are part of the project. If you're in Taiwan, just a word of advice: take heed, look around at what's happening, and understand that you know what your ultimate what the ultimate outcome is going to be. Don't forget, everybody, ScottRitterExtra.com. Everybody watch it. All of Scott's good work can be found at ScottRitterExtra.com. And let's not forget this. Everybody's got to eat. He does a lot of work. You can see everything on at ScottRitterExtra.com. He doesn't charge a dime for that. But he has ways on there that you can contribute to the cause that can allow him to continue. He's got to travel. He's got to buy computer equipment. He just got a new mic that's fantastic. So we need to go to ScottRitterExtra.com and make sure we help keep Scott Ritter able to do the things he needs to do. Of course, look across the bottom here: Patreon, PayPal, buymeacoffee.com. All that stuff's great if you can help the channel. If you can't afford it, that's fine. Make sure you share this particular video on all of your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, Scott Ritter. I appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Garland.
All right. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. As I said, everything's scrolling across the bottom. If you can help it, fine. If you can't, look, that's fine. Just feed your family, do what you got to do. But please share this important video on all of your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. I'm out.